People have been interacting with the cannabis plant for thousands of years, long before it became the subject of political debate, medical research, recreational culture, and internet memes. It existed as something much simpler, a plant that changed the way human beings felt. It altered thoughts, softened emotions, and shifted perception in ways that people throughout history found meaningful, sometimes healing, sometimes enlightening, and sometimes purely enjoyable. Today, millions of people around the world continue to smoke weed for reasons that are far more psychological than most realize. To the casual observer, cannabis use might seem like nothing more than a habit, a hobby, or a recreational choice. But when we look closely through the lenses of neuroscience, personality psychology, social psychology, and human behavior, we find a far deeper story. This is not merely the story of a substance. It is the story of why people are drawn to it, why they return to it, why some feel it helps them understand themselves, why others feel it frees them, and why, for many, the act of smoking weed becomes an emotional, social, and even existential experience. This is the psychology of people who love smoking weed. The first encounter: curiosity, novelty, and the human mind. Most people's relationship with cannabis begins with curiosity. Curiosity itself is a fundamental human trait, rooted in the brain's drive to explore, experiment, and understand. Humans are wired to seek new experiences because novelty activates the brain's reward system. When something unfamiliar appears in our environment, whether an idea, a sensation, or a social experience, it sparks dopamine release. Cannabis, being a mind-altering substance, represents one of the most potent forms of novelty a person can encounter without extreme risk. It offers a glimpse of a different mental state, a tiny departure from the everyday version of reality that the mind is accustomed to. For some, this novelty is thrilling. They enjoy the unpredictability of the experience, the possibility of heightened senses, deeper thoughts, or new emotional tones. These are the individuals who often describe their first experience with weed as eye-opening or transformative. Others approach it more cautiously. They're not necessarily seeking a profound experience. They may simply be going along with social momentum. A friend offers a hit. A group is passing a joint around. The moment creates a sense of inclusion, and the person participates, not out of a deep desire, but out of a desire to belong. Still, even for these individuals, the first encounter is psychologically fascinating. Cannabis interacts with the brain's cannabinoid receptors, altering the way information is processed. Time might feel slower. Thoughts may feel looser, expanded, or more introspective. Colors appear brighter. Music sinks deeper. Emotions soften or intensify depending on the context. For some, this experience is enough to draw them in. For others, it raises questions about the mind itself. And for a smaller subset, it becomes the beginning of a lifelong relationship. The brain's reward system and why some people enjoy weed more than others. Not every brain reacts to cannabis the same way. This is one of the most important psychological truths about weed. Some people's brains are biologically primed to enjoy it, others are not. THC, the primary psychoactive compound in cannabis, binds to CB1 receptors in the brain. Receptors involved in pleasure, mood regulation, appetite, motivation, and perception. But the density and sensitivity of these receptors vary dramatically from one person to another. Some people naturally have a stronger endocannabinoid system. When they consume THC, their brain responds with pronounced pleasure, relaxation, creativity, or euphoria. These individuals often describe cannabis as something that fits them, something that feels natural, comforting, or mentally aligned with how they prefer to function. Others, however, experience the opposite. They may feel anxious, paranoid, or mentally scattered. Their brain chemistry simply does not interact with THC in the same beneficial way. These are the people who might try weed once or twice and decide it isn't for them. But the people who do feel that strong alignment, the ones whose neurochemistry responds positively, often develop a psychological affinity for cannabis. They're not necessarily addicted. Their attraction is rooted in how weed modulates their emotions, thoughts, and internal experience. In many ways, the people who love weed are those whose brains treat it not just as a substance, but as a tool for shifting mood, altering thought patterns, or enhancing certain aspects of consciousness. Openness to experience, the personality trait most common among weed lovers. Personality psychology gives us another clue about who is most drawn to cannabis. There is a trait in the Big Five personality model known as openness to experience. It encompasses imagination, creativity, curiosity, appreciation for art, and a desire for emotional depth. People high in openness enjoy new experiences, abstract thinking, and introspection. They are often imaginative, intuitive, and drawn to ideas that sit outside the boundaries of everyday thought. Studies consistently show that individuals with high openness are significantly more likely to use cannabis and to enjoy it. Why? Because cannabis enhances exactly what open individuals already enjoy. Deep thinking, sensory enhancement, emotional exploration, creative ideation, philosophical curiosity. To a person with this personality profile, weed is not merely an intoxicant. It is a mental doorway, a cognitive amplifier, a way to further explore the inner landscape of the mind. This is why so many artists, musicians, writers, designers, and creators have historically gravitated toward cannabis. It doesn't necessarily make them creative. Instead, it removes certain mental filters, allowing them to access a different style of thinking, one that feels fluid, expressive, and unconstrained. For these individuals, smoking weed isn't escapism, it is exploration. For others, weed is relief, self-medication, and emotional regulation. But not everyone who loves weed is chasing creativity or introspection. For many, cannabis provides something much simpler: relief. Human emotion is complicated. Anxiety, stress, depression, overstimulation, and emotional overload are increasingly common in modern life. The mind is not designed to navigate non-stop information, constant productivity pressure, or a globalized social world where comparison is unavoidable. For some people, cannabis acts as a soft landing. It quiets internal noise. It slows runaway thoughts. It makes the body feel comfortable, safe, and regulated. Psychologically, this can be incredibly powerful, especially for individuals who naturally experience heightened sensitivity or intense internal dialogue. Weed becomes a mental buffer, a gentle emotional shield. Some people describe this as turning down the volume on their thoughts. Others describe it as stepping back from their emotions. Some simply say it makes them feel normal. Cannabis, in this context, becomes a form of self-medication, not necessarily in a harmful way, but in a way that reflects an unmet emotional need. While it's true that relying on cannabis to manage deep emotional issues can lead to dependency, it's also true that many people use it responsibly and consciously as a tool for emotional balance. To them, weed is not about getting high. It is about feeling okay. The social psychology of weed: bonding, belonging, and shared experience. Humans are social creatures. We seek connection, acceptance, and belonging. And cannabis, perhaps more than almost any other substance, has a unique ability to facilitate social bonding. People don't just smoke weed alone. They pass joints. They share bowls. They sit together, talk more openly, and laugh more freely. This creates a psychological cohesion that is surprisingly powerful. Sharing a joint becomes a ritual, one that communicates trust, inclusion, and mutual relaxation. People who love weed often love the community surrounding it just as much as the plant itself. Social psychology teaches us that shared vulnerability creates deeper connection. When people smoke weed together, they lower their guards simultaneously. The environment becomes softer, more accepting, less judgmental. Conversations flow in ways they normally wouldn't. People reveal more, listen more, empathize more. For many weed lovers, this sense of social comfort is a major reason they return to the experience. It isn't just the high, it's the human warmth that comes with it. This is also why cannabis culture feels so distinct. There is a sense of camaraderie, an understanding that this shared experience brings people closer in a gentle, authentic way. Identity, self-expression, and the symbolism of weed. For some, smoking weed becomes more than a habit. It becomes part of their identity. Identity is a psychological construct shaped by our experiences, values, social groups, and personal narratives. Many people adopt cannabis as a symbol of who they are or who they want to be. For example, the laid-back, carefree persona, the creative, free-thinking artist, the introspective, philosophical type, the rebellious outsider, the nature-connected, spiritual seeker. Weed becomes a shorthand expression of lifestyle and worldview. It signals openness, relaxation, non-conformity, or depth. People begin to associate certain music, hobbies, aesthetics, and social circles with cannabis culture. Over time, this identity can become deeply rooted. This doesn't mean the identity is false or shallow. In many cases, it reflects genuine traits and preferences. Cannabis becomes a mirror, something that reflects how a person sees themselves and how they interact with the world. The cognitive effects, why some think better high and some don't. Cannabis influences cognitive function in complex ways. For some people, it opens mental pathways that feel blocked when sober. Thoughts feel freer, more associative, more fluid. These individuals often report improved problem solving, creativity, or emotional insight when high. For others, weed slows thinking, disrupts focus, or increases confusion. This difference is crucial in understanding why certain people love weed and others don't. People who enjoy cannabis cognitively tend to possess one or more of the following traits. They are introspective and comfortable with inner exploration. They enjoy observing their own thoughts. They are creative thinkers who thrive on mental looseness. They do not fear altered states of consciousness. Their anxiety does not spike with loss of control. On the other hand, individuals who dislike the cognitive effects often prefer structure, clarity, control, and predictability. Weed disrupts those qualities and thus feels uncomfortable to them. This is another psychological truth. People who love weed are often people who are psychologically comfortable with mental flexibility. They do not fear drifting thoughts or new interpretations of reality. The emotional lens, how weed changes feelings. Another major factor is how cannabis influences emotional processing. Weed can amplify emotions or soften them depending on the person and the context. Some people experience heightened empathy, deeper emotional understanding, or more compassion for themselves and others. Weed becomes a tool for emotional insight. They understand their feelings better. They process them more gently. They allow emotions to pass through without resistance. Others experience emotional dulling, a sense of detachment or distance from their feelings. For people who struggle with overwhelming emotions, this detachment can feel like relief. But this emotional shift is not universal. Some people experience increased sensitivity, heightened anxiety, or intrusive thoughts. This is why cannabis can be calming to one person and stressful to another. People who love weed tend to enjoy the emotional tone it creates. They like how it reshapes their internal world. Weed as a coping mechanism. Healthy versus unhealthy use. Psychologists differentiate between adaptive and maladaptive coping. Adaptive coping brings stability or insight without causing harm. Maladaptive coping temporarily reduces stress but creates long-term problems. People who love weed often fall into one of two categories. 1. The healthy users. These individuals use cannabis intentionally, moderately, and with awareness. They integrate it into their life without letting it control their life. They experience benefits, creativity, relaxation, social connection, without feeling dependent. 2. The unhealthy users. These individuals use weed to avoid emotions, responsibilities, or internal conflicts. They rely on it to escape rather than explore. They may experience psychological withdrawal when not using it. not because weed is physically addictive, but because it becomes their primary emotional regulator. The key difference between these groups is not how much they smoke, but why they smoke. The ritual of smoking. Why the process matters as much as the high. One of the most overlooked aspects of cannabis psychology is the ritual itself. Many people who love weed are attached not just to the effects, but to the process of smoking. The grinding of the flower, the packing of the bowl, the rolling of the joint, the flick of the lighter, the inhale, the exhale, the pause. This ritual creates a psychological rhythm, a moment of intentional slowdown, a structured transition between the stress of daily life and the calm of personal time. Rituals are powerful because they train the brain to associate certain actions with certain emotions. Over time, the act of preparing weed can evoke relaxation even before smoking begins. For many, this ritual becomes a mindfulness practice, a way to ground themselves, a way to create space. In this sense, the love of weed is intertwined with the love of the ritual, cannabis and the search for meaning. There is also a philosophical dimension. Many people who love weed describe moments of insight, perspective shift, or existential reflection while high. They may think about life, relationships, purpose, mortality, creativity, or personal growth in ways they don't normally access. These experiences can feel profound, even life-changing. They deepen the psychological bond between the user and the substance. Weed becomes not just a recreational tool, but a companion in the exploration of meaning. So, why do people love smoking weed? The core psychological reasons. Summarizing thousands of studies and countless personal experiences, we find that people love smoking weed for a combination of reasons. It enhances pleasure and novelty. It engages curiosity and creativity. It provides emotional relief or regulation. It strengthens social connection and bonding. It aligns with certain personality traits. It creates cognitive and sensory shift. It supports introspection and meaning-making. It becomes a ritual, a habit, or an identity. But above all, people love weed because it changes the experience of being human, even if only briefly. It alters thought, emotion, sensation, and perception in ways that many find incredibly valuable. It offers a small doorway into another version of reality, one that feels softer, deeper, or more interesting. And in a world full of pressure, uncertainty, and constant stimulation, that doorway can feel like a gift.